It's always fun when you get a little national pub, and Pitt showed up getting a little bit of national pub yesterday. Two guys really got a little bit of national publicity as they ended up on Bruce Feldman's annual freaks list. All the freaks of college football. Pitt had one guy make the list and another one get a mention in the write-up about that one guy. The top 100, or in this case 101, just athletic freaks in the sport. Pitt got a little shout out in there. So we're going to talk about that today, and also the offensive line, kind of what that situation looks like after a few days, after a week or so of training camp, and what the biggest storyline to watch there is. Why my legal pad will tell us that Pitt needs a little change in fortune, maybe just to get a little bit lucky this year, which they haven't been. According to the legal pad, they haven't been in quite some time. We got a lot of Pitt football stuff to talk about, mostly along the lines in the line of scrimmage, which is where the game is won, right? We'll get a little bit of lineman talk. We'll get a little bit of other things talk here on the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt, right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's midweek, the midweek edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. 1 week into training camp. It started last week. It started last Wednesday. Last Wednesday morning was the first practice of camp. Here we are 1 week in. They don't have practice today, or at least they don't have an open media viewing window if they are practicing. So as far as we're concerned, they're not practicing today. They'll be back at it tomorrow and Friday, and we'll have lots of coverage for you, of course, at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the place to get all of your Pitt sports coverage, particularly your coverage of training camp. We have football, basketball, and recruiting coverage at Panther-Lair.com, but we have training camp. You see the photos right there. You see all the content, everything up there, and even more is all from training camp because we have a ton of it. We have photos, videos, articles, interviews, press conferences, everything you could need to stay on top of all the main storylines with Pitt football as they move through training camp 2024. It's all right there, Panther-Lair.com, and of course our YouTube channel right here that you are watching, hopefully, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We appreciate everybody who watches. We appreciate everybody who likes the video, everybody who subscribes. Don't forget, tonight we have our live show. Tonight at 8:30 p.m., me and Jim Hammett will get together, talk about everything coming out of training camp through the first week, all the storylines, all the things that are notable to us, and anything else that we might just want to mention or talk about. And, of course, anything you want to talk about, because during the live streams, during these Morning Pitt episodes, Monday through Friday, you watch these things, and you might put some comments in, and maybe I'll respond, maybe I won't. I try to respond to all of them. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. During the live stream, the live show tonight, or our post-game shows that we do during the season, you put your comments in the chat, and we read them. Most of them. As many as we feel we should. And so you're kind of part of the conversation. You can react to things that we say. You can ask questions. We can have that back and forth. And it's a lot of fun. Quite frankly, that's some of the most fun part of it is Jim and I talking to each other and then you guys joining in the conversation. So we hope you join us tonight, 8:30 p.m. right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com for the live Panther-Lair show. We always enjoy doing that. We also always enjoy reading Bruce Feldman's annual freaks list. Bruce Feldman, I'll say, from The Athletic, he's been with a couple different outlets over the years. I think he's one of my favorite college football writers. He's always struck me as a guy who just plays it very straight down the middle. He doesn't really, he doesn't get sensationalist about things. He's very even keeled. And he just genuinely loves the sport, and I think likes to pump guys up and pump teams up and likes to tell the stories of the sport. And I think he's got a lot of respect from people in the sport, from coaches and players, administrators. I think they respect him. And so he ends up getting good stories, not just like sourced reporting, like, oh, sources tell me that so-and-so is getting hired or something like that, but also just he gets access to get good stories. Like, I want the, he can text a coach or he can call a coach and say, hey, let's talk. I'd like to hear from you about this. And a lot of coaches will take his call, and a lot of coaches will respond to him and have those conversations. And I think that's because of how he plays it. I think, like I say, he plays it very straight, plays it down the middle. And I appreciate that about Bruce Feldman's reporting. And one thing I love that he does every year is the Freaks List. And he put it out yesterday. Last year, Bub Means made the list. Let me see how he defines it. I just want to see what he says, what he calls it. I'll just read right here from the beginning of Bruce Feldman's piece. It's on The Athletic. It says, the Freaks List started in the summer of 2005 with a linebacker in the MAC named Turner Nandy. The weight room stories his strength coach told me blew my mind, so much so that I ranked Nandy from Miami of Ohio above Vernon Davis, Calvin Johnson, and a bunch of other players primed for big-time NFL careers. I just want to see where Turner Nandy went to. He went to Miami of Ohio. I think he played for Narduzzi, actually. So it's kind of funny because, the connection there, we talk about having the trust and respect of coaches. Turner Nandy was a guy who played for Narduzzi, I believe, at Miami of Ohio back in the day. And so, a little connection there. It says, 20 years later, the list, the thing I'm probably most known for in football circles, has only grown. At first, there were only 10 freaks. Now it's expanded way beyond just the FBS with submissions from schools, coaches, teammates, parents, NFL scouts, combine trainers, and agents. And I think everybody looks at this list. Everybody's interested in this list. And I think coaches want to get their guys on this list. And I mean, it's not just receivers, as a matter of, and running backs. I mean, there's a lot of linemen on here. There are quarterbacks on here, defensive linemen, offensive linemen. And sometimes I think he really favors linemen because, like, if you get a lineman who's got a crazy vertical or whatever it may be, he likes to highlight those guys. Now, Bub Means made the list last year, and understandably so. He went to the combine and had a great combine. I mean, and that's what it's really measuring, is those guys who are just truly exceptional in some of the sort of combine type of measurements. And it's like, if you can run fast and you're super strong and you can jump high, like, you take all the guys in college football who are super fast and can jump high and they're really strong, and then which ones are the biggest? Those are some of the guys that Bruce Feldman favors the most. And Pitt's entry this year was a big guy. It was a lineman. It was Francis Brew, the freshman defensive lineman from Ohio, checked in at number 77 on the list. The number doesn't matter. I mean, to me, Feldman may have some ranking to it, but just making the list is notable. Bruce Feldman said about Francis Brew, quote, "This freshman from Ohio who enrolled in January quickly turned heads inside the program. The 6'1", 280-pounder squatted 675 and bench pressed 475 pounds. He went on to say more, but we'll get to that in a second. I actually think he's selling Francis Brew short, because Francis Brew told us yesterday that he actually is squatting 700 right now. 700 pounds. That's crazy. I mean, that is a crazy amount of weight. And he did bench 475, but he said that he just wanted to smack it off his chest and push, and he got through it and felt like, you know what? I could probably go heavier. He thinks he could get to 495, and his goal is 500. That's remarkable for a freshman in college. And I asked him, because we interviewed him yesterday, and you can see the interview right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I asked Francis Brew, I said, all right, so you got this 475 bench. That's crazy. Have you tested, like, the combine standard, right? Because the combine bench press test is not how much weight can you put up. It's how many times can you do 225 pounds. How many reps can you do at 225? This is the combine standard. This is what they do at pro days. And so I asked him that, and he said, well, I haven't really tested that since I got to Pitt. The last time I did it, I was home. I just got done with a chest workout. I wanted to kind of do, he called it a burnout, which I think is just like, all right, you're done with all your workout and everything. You're going to do one last thing where you're just going to spend everything you've got left. And he did 33 reps, according to him. According to Francis Brew, he did 33 reps at 225. This past year, the top defensive tackle on the bench was Jordan Jefferson from LSU. He ended up being, like a 4th-round pick or something like that. He did 34 reps. Francis Brew, at the end of a workout, did 33. I said, you've got to be able to get up, like, into the 40s, right? Like, if you were to actually, like, work on it and focus on it. He's like, yeah, I think I could get pretty close to 40. Crazy strength out of Francis Brew. And he said he's even got a 31.5-inch vertical right now, which did not make it into Bruce Feldman's article. Or write up about Francis Brew. But I'd say if you're a 6'1", 280-pound guy and you can squat 700 and you can bench 475 and you can do 33 reps at 225 and you can vertical 31.5, I'd say you're a freak. And I don't think there's any question about it. And Francis Brew is not a huge surprise because last week at Media Day when we were talking to some of the players, we asked, who are some of the young guys that have stood out and impressed you? And several guys mentioned Francis Brew, and a couple of guys like Nate Matlack and Lyndon Cooper, so one D end and one offensive lineman, both said he's maybe the strongest guy on the team. And it's pretty clear from those numbers, if he's not the strongest guy on the team, he's no worse than top 3. and he's probably not number 3. Just crazy strength. Now, there's obviously a lot more in football that goes into it. In college football, Power 4 football, ACC football. I mean, you can't just be strong. There are other guys who are strong. They might not be as strong as you, but there are other guys who are strong, and there are guys who are close enough to you in strength that they can offset your strength advantage with technique if your technique's not where it needs to be. And he seems to understand that. He knows he's got to keep improving in that regard. But boy, when the technique and the knowledge and the understanding of the game catch up to the strength, Francis Brew is going to be a monster. Or, I mean, he's got the makings of being a monster. And he's an interesting story, of course, because as you may or may not recall, leading up to signing day last December, he was a bit on the fence, even though he'd been committed to Pitt since the summer. Actually, maybe earlier than that. He might have been committed since the spring. I forget exactly how long he had been committed. But he had been committed for a significant amount of time, and then there were some late efforts from some other schools in the Big Ten to try to flip him away from Pitt leading up to signing day. Pitt was able to hold on to him, but that's something to keep in mind. Everybody's on the market at all times anyway. Everybody's a free agent every offseason, so it's not like it makes him unique. But the fact that he was, maybe flirting with it leading up to signing day is something to keep an eye on. Now, we've talked about the defensive line depth. We've talked about the defensive tackles, and we've also talked at different points about the value in redshirting or not redshirting. I think if Francis Brew can give you 5 good, impactful snaps per game, then you play him for, 65 snaps all season. I think you do it, and I think it's worth it. I think you get him on the field and get him that practice time and get him that experience, and maybe you even get something positive out of him. Maybe he beats a guard, he commands a double team or something like that and makes a stop for you. I think all these guys, Francis Brew, Jasir Whittington, Sincere Edwards, any of these freshmen, Cam Lindsey, if they can help you, you play them. And Cam Lindsey, yesterday, we got to see a little bit of a live contact period. It was their first day in full pads, and we got to see a live contact period. And I saw Cam Lindsey get to the ball carrier in a hurry during a live 11-on-11 contact period. He got to the ball carrier in a hurry. He hit him hard. He hit him fast. It was a big play. Now, he had some help from Jesse Anderson, who also exploded out of nowhere. But look, if Cam Lindsey can do that kind of thing, if he can help you, either in the defense or on special teams, you play him. Outside of offensive linemen, there's no compelling reason to redshirt anybody anymore because you just don't know how long you're going to have them. And I'm not saying you bet on everybody leaving the team in 2 years or 1 year or 3 years or whatever it is, but I think, whereas in the past you might have been like, oh, we'd really like to hold off. We'd really like to keep a red shirt for Francis Brew or Jasir Whittington or Sincere Edwards, Cam Lindsey. Really like to hold off on those guys. No, you don't hold off. Like, if you're on the fence about a guy, you play him. Period. If there's a guy who's obviously not ready and he's not going to be able to help you, I mean, yeah, like, you don't have to burn a red shirt just for the hell of it. I mean, like, you do it. If there's a guy you're on the fence about, you think he might be able to help you, you play him. And I think that's the case with the defensive tackles, the defensive end, Sincere Edwards. I think Cam Lindsey, anybody who you think can help. If the young DBs can help you, if the young, if Jules Goff can give you 5 snaps per game on offense, and maybe contribute on special teams or something, play him. What are you waiting for? There's no reason to wait back. None at all. You're probably not going to play the offensive lineman, like Maurice Schmorenzer or Caleb Holmes or, any of those guys. I don't think there's any reason to play them. We'll talk about the offensive line depth maybe tomorrow, actually. I thought we might talk about that today, but we're getting caught up in this discussion about the freshmen. But it's the truth. Like, you look down the list, and outside of the offensive lineman, and I guess the quarterback, because there's not really a reason to play Julian Duggar this year, everybody else is fair game and should be fair game. And there's really no good reason not to play them. If they could do something that helps you. If you feel like we'll give him a series, we'll give Francis Brew and Jasir Whittington 1 series each per game. I think they benefit from it. I think it potentially could benefit you. And I also, I'm cherry picking a little bit when I'm talking about Brew, Whittington, Sincere Edwards, and Cam Lindsey. I mean, those are 4 4-star guys. Those are 4 very good young prospects, very good players who, like we're not talking about, maybe a guy who doesn't have quite as high of a ceiling. I mean, it's a lot easier when they're really good players. You know what I mean? Like, I think you just say, yeah, of course, we're playing him. Who cares? I would have used Isaiah Neal more last year, quite honestly. Unless you felt like he was just so far away from being able to do anything positive on the field that he was going to be a complete liability, I would have used him last year as well. They didn't. He redshirted. He's a redshirt freshman now. Doesn't really move the needle for me, the fact that they have an extra year of eligibility for Isaiah Neal. I think Isaiah Neal is going to play his way out. I think he has the ceiling to play his way out of here and not even make it through 5 years of eligibility here, because I think he's going to be really good like that. But those other guys, I just like play them. Now, I mentioned a few times, I made a passing reference to the fact that there was another Pitt player who got mentioned in the Freaks list, the Bruce Feldman Freaks list. And so, he had Francis Brew, number 77 on the list, the little 2 sentences about Brew. And then he says, as part of the same paragraph, Pitt linebacker Brandon George, a former state runner-up in the discus and bronze medalist in the shot put, is another Freaks caliber athlete on the defense. The 6'3", 240-pound senior vertical jumped 40 inches this offseason. All right, that's crazy, right? like that is an insane vertical, right? I'm just looking up the there were a handful of guys who jumped 40 inches at the combine this year. But as I scroll through this, I mean, there was Dallas Turner, the edge rusher from Alabama. And that's it for like big athletes. Everybody else was a receiver, a corner, or a running back, or maybe a safety. Nobody else at linebacker. The biggest linebacker was a kid from Washington who jumped 39.5, and the next biggest was 37.5. So if Brandon George is out there jumping 40 inches, that's really impressive for a linebacker. And here's the thing about Brandon George, and I wanted to talk about him as well too, is he's sort of penciled in there as the starting middle linebacker. Looks like he's finally going to get that opportunity to be the guy. I think a lot of people have opinions on Brandon George, but I don't know if there's a ton to back up those opinions. Brandon George, for all the time he's been here, and he's entering his 6th year now, for all the games he's played, all the seasons he's been here, all the time, everything he's been a part of, Brandon George has never started a game. Never started a game. Is that remarkable? I mean, doesn't it feel like he probably started games along the way, that somebody got hurt and he moved in there and all this, He never started a game. He played 11 games as a true freshman, all on special teams. He played 11 games in 2020 on special teams, a little bit as a backup middle linebacker. 2021, he played every game. He was on special teams, backup middle linebacker. 2022, he got hurt, so he only played 3 games, the first 3 plus the Sun Bowl. And then last year, he played in every game, and he was the backup at middle linebacker. He had 49 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, a sack, and an interception. Those were all career highs for Brandon George, but never along the way. I want to get the total games played. Despite the fact that he played 52 games over the last 5 seasons, he's never started a game. I don't know. Let me look through his snap counts here. Last year, he had a couple of games where he played 40 snaps. He played 40 snaps against West Virginia, 41 against Florida State. But I would have to say that those were career highs. In 2022, he never played more than 26 snaps in a single game. 2021, he never played more than 38. And he only had 2 games there where he was in the 30s. 2020 and 19, well, he got into the 30s for the 2020 game at Clemson. He played 31 snaps. But I mean, here's a guy who's only played. He's played 52 games. He's only played more than 40 defensive snaps in a game twice over the course of his career. He's never started a game. And I don't say all this to say, man, he's going to be really good this year. What I say is, I say this as a way of saying, I don't know what Brandon George is. I don't know who Brandon George is. I don't know what kind of player he is. There have been times where he's flashed and made good plays, and there's been times where he looks like he was out of position or out of place. I think there's a general feeling that he's not fast enough or not athletic enough. And some of that, I almost wonder, is it just because he's kind of big? He's a bigger guy. What did Bruce Feldman say he is? 6'3", 240 or something like that. Pitt lists him at, 6'3", 240. He's a bigger guy. So maybe that affects our perception of him. But, I mean, coming out of high school, he was, he had really good, Nike Spark scores and things like that. His athleticism tested well. If he's jumping 40 inches, I mean, I don't think I think that speaks to some explosiveness. I think he's just a guy who hasn't gotten an opportunity. He was behind Servassier Dennis for a bunch of years. And then Shane Simon last year. And like I say, I think a lot of people have a perception of Brandon George, but I don't know if we really know what kind of player Brandon George is. And now he's finally going to get his opportunity. He's going to get a chance to go out there as a starting middle linebacker. He's going to probably play, I said over the course, he's played 52 games and he's only topped 40 snaps twice. I'd imagine he'll play more than 40 defensive snaps every game this season. Maybe he'll only be in the 30s for the Kent State or, Youngstown State game or something like that. But I imagine he's going to play 40 plus in all the games that matter. And maybe we'll finally find out who Brandon George is. And it's not like a case where we're like, wow, we've been hyping this guy up for years. Is he finally going to do something? We haven't really been hyping this guy up at all. Brandon George has been one of the least hyped players on the team for the last 5 years or 6 years or however long he's been here. And just perception-wise among the fans, I think the perception is that he's too slow and not a good enough player to be a regular fixture of the defense. Now, obviously, he's been beat out by other guys over the course of those years. Servassier Dennis for most of it, Shane Simon for one there. But I'm interested to see. I'm interested to see what Brandon George can do. I'm interested to see what he can do with the opportunity. If he can finally, he's finally getting the opportunity. Can he make the most of it? And I think it'll be fun to watch. I think it'll be interesting to see what he does. And I guess if I could sum it up, I would say I think we should keep an open mind with Brandon George. I didn't get to my legal pad. We're already over 20 minutes. You guys say I talk too much as it is. So we'll have to talk about that tomorrow. Offensive line conversation tomorrow because it's an important one to have. How Pitt could use just a little bit of luck along the offensive line. I said we would talk about it today. We didn't get to it because we talked about Francis Brew and Brandon George and redshirts and lots of other things. Brandon George did not redshirt, played 11 games on special teams in 2019. I'd say you do the same thing with Cam Lindsey and maybe get him some defensive snaps as well, just to bring it back around to that conversation. All right, don't forget, live show tonight, 8:30 p.m. right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Let's have a little conversation about Pitt football. I look forward to that as always. And then we'll be back with you tomorrow for another Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So have a great Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in. Like this video and subscribe, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow morning for the Morning Pitt right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.